Let's do a second example of HVAC calculations. This one will be quick because it's a very similar project, and maybe we'll pick up things that we missed on example one. So let's get going on that. The name of the project is called Jeff's Beverage. Jeff's Beverage turns out to be a liquor store that is very similar to our space because it's a retail store. And some of the stuff is already done. So let's go over it real quick. Most liquor stores are a combination of two buildings that have to be separated. One is the beer side, and the other one's the liquor and wine side. So the liquor side, it's basically an open space. Would take the area of it, 4,223 square feet, and then exterior wall dimensions. It's separated from the beer side by this one. The beer side has some coolers, also some office, a couple bathrooms here, storage room, and upstairs. This one does actually have a second floor. The right side of the building, the liquor side, actually doesn't have a floor, so it's a high ceiling space. This middle section has a ceiling at some height, and then it has a conference room in there and a kitchenette. Has the big man's office and his own private bathroom. Also, there's some stairs that start at the first floor. They go up, and then they show up here. They're laying on there's a little mezzanine above the coolers, or storage for boxes and things. And from there, there's a landing, and then you take a few more steps, and you go up to the office. Looks here that the only ways to go into the big man's office is to come from the outside and come in this door, or come out from the mezzanine and come into this door. It makes sense. It seems to me that we're gonna put a door here, so that the boss doesn't have to go outside to make some coffee or grab something from the fridge. That's probably something that needs to be corrected. So this area in the center has two floors. This area here above the coolers, where you grab your cold beers and cold beverages, has a little platform above that you really can't get into unless you go through this door. So it's a private space, but it still exists. And then the rest of the beer side has a high ceiling. So this area extends to the second floor. So here we have all kinds of conditions. We have a high ceiling area, another high ceiling area. We have an area with a ceiling above it, so it wouldn't have a roof because essentially the second floor is a conditioned space. So there's actually no load coming to it because above it there isn't a roof getting hot, but it's a conditioned space. And then the second floor, it doesn't have a floor load because underneath it is a conditioned space, so there's no heating load coming to it, but it does have a roof. So same size space, different conditions. Chances are the calculations for air conditioning for the first floor, at least the part that has a ceiling above it and a second floor above it, is going to be less of a load here because the only exposures are on the outside walls here. The exposure below doesn't contribute, and the exposure above doesn't contribute because it's a conditioned space. The only things that make it that might contribute here is this little tiny 20 plus 10 feet of wall, so 30-foot 8 on both sides, and then whatever the activity is. So some of it is retail, some of it is office and storage. When we do the retail here for the first floor where the beer sales are, I'm going to have to break up the space. From here over, I'm going to call this sales 1, and then the rest, or sales 2, and then I'm going to call this sales 1. Because they're different spaces. This one has a 20-foot ceiling. It has a roof load. This has a 10-foot ceiling. It has no roof load. So I'm going to have to break up this space. Let's do that now. So the areas are pretty much figured out. There's no area here. I'm just going to put it just so we have it. this area here exists, but it's not going to be conditioned because it's a cooler that doesn't need air conditioning, right? Because it's got that's a whole separate cooling system. It's essentially a huge refrigerator, and the area for this is 668 feet. It's handy, I suppose, because the space above it will have a similar area, maybe, but maybe not. It looks like the mezzanine extends to this dotted line. So when you approach here to reach in the cooler, there's actually going to be a ceiling above you beyond this dotted line right there, and that's why the mezzanine area is a little larger than the actual cooler itself. Point is, we don't condition the space. It's already going to be colder than anything else in the space because it is indeed a cooler. And that's what's happening there. So I'm going to have to treat this a little differently. I already have a polyline made there. I'm gonna this side to the right side of this line is gonna be one thing. To the left side of this line is gonna be another thing. Here's something that I will do just to be lazy. I'm gonna draw a line right on that line. Then I'm gonna move everything some distance, some known distance. This stuff on the side is for reference from a previous project. So when I move this, I'm going to move the other stuff too out of the way. Let's come out here horizontally 200 feet. The reason I do 200 feet is when I put it back, I'm going to move it back 200 feet to be there. But what I'm trying to do here is split this polyline into two spaces, the one on the right here, the one on the left. Let's do that. Because I'm going to split it into two spaces, I'm going to copy it twice. Let's copy it up here 100 feet. And then I'm going to trim this polyline to one side of the doesn't want to do it. I'm going to extend it. I'm going to trim this polyline to the one side of that. Then I'm going to fillet the line. I got to be careful here because it's putting an arc on it. So I'm not going to fill it. I'm going to chamfer it. I'll double check the distance that are 0. So I'm going to chamfer this and that. And what that does is make the new line that I made part of the polyline. And then I'm going to fillet this here. So now I have an area. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. But I'm going to trim from the other side. So I'm going to trim. This is my trimming edge. And I'm going to trim the line there. Then I'm going to chamfer. And the reason I fillet it and I don't fillet it, I chamfer instead, is because in the HVAC drawings, I will eventually do a lot of fillets that have a preset radius. So I want to keep that. For 1/8 inch scale drawings, the fillet distances would be, the radius distance would be 12. For 1/4 inch drawings, the fillet distance would be 6. So evidently, we started this project with a 1/4 inch drawing, but I suspect that we're at 1/4 scale. So I'm going to have to change that anyways. So back to this. Now I split this one big area into two. I'm going to put them back together. I'm going to move that down 100 feet. And the reason I use nice round hundreds is because I can remember that. And if you look, the original space was 5,200 square feet. Now, we split it into two spaces, one here under a roof and one here with a 20-foot ceiling. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. This one's a 20-foot ceiling under a roof. This one's a 10-foot ceiling under a conditioned space. I'm going to put it back. If you recall, I moved it 200 feet to the left. Now I'm going to move it 200 feet to the right. And it's going to land right there. Now, when we list these two separate areas, they should add up to 5,260. Let's see. That smaller area, it's 1170. And then the bigger side, the side that's on the roof with a 20-foot ceiling, is 3373. All right, what's 3373 plus 1170? Chances are, you know what happened there. Chances are is 5263, and because of rounding, we gain a square foot when we split it. About 1 square foot, one total square foot out of 5,200, almost 5,300 square feet is not a big deal. The other thing we have to change here is the dimensions. Now, this space is 60. I would round out to 61 feet, and then this space will be something else. I'll highlight the dimension and I'll stretch it to our area line. So whatever that was before, I guess 90 feet 11 inches, I split it. So when I size this area, I'm gonna use that dimension. So that's what's happening there. This big thing here is the total area footprint of the space, whatever that was, 10,534 feet, 10,534. Put that there because it actually later on I'm gonna need to know that area to do something else totally unrelated to air conditioning. But while I'm finding out areas, I might as well find that one out. And then it's possible that we found out the area, the total area of the space, and we did. There's a polyline there that it measures the second floor, and it's at 2149. It's not there anywhere. I'm going to show it. 2149. That's it. We're done. Somebody else started this project, and but he did a good job. I think actually the only thing I got to fix is because the humidor is a separate space from the sales area. I'm gonna actually copy this dimension, and because we're not conditioning beyond here, I'm just gonna ignore this large dimension. Now when I look at the sales area, the beer sales area to the left is going to have an exposure here to, and we'll find out what direction that is, but it's going to have an exposure to this side, and it's not going to be the entire length because I'm going to treat the humidor as a separate space. So the exposure is 21.5 feet plus 23.5 feet. So that's 22 plus 23, that's 45 feet exposure, rather than the entire length of the building, which was 69.5. I'm going to ignore this part because I'm going to ignore this dimension here because, as I mentioned before, this is a separate space conditioned by a separate machine. Even though there'll be some heat generation, we're going to expel it to the outside on the backside, which won't contribute to this. So when we also when we treat this space here, it won't have any exposure on this side of the building because this essentially, well, it's against a conditioned space. That covers the areas again. I'm going to end this video here. I'm going to call it part 1, example 2.